The sports world is filled with larger-than-life figures. Michael Jordan, Lionel Messi, Babe Ruth, Muhammad Ali. These athletes transcend the sports they played and became modern-day legends. For decades, people have been collecting valuable pieces of memorabilia from these players in sports, whether it be trading cards, game-worn memorabilia, game-used items like Shohei Ohtani's 50th home run ball this year, ticket stubs, or even historical sporting documents. These items, which are intrinsically worth next to nothing, can now bring in millions of dollars due to the historical significance behind them. Today, we are going to be looking in depth at the most expensive sports memorabilia to ever be sold. Kicking the list off, we have this iconic Kobe Bryant jersey worn in 25 games during his 2007-2008 MVP season. The jersey, which was also signed by Kobe himself, was sold for $5.8 million in February of 2023 to an anonymous bidder. The jersey has been featured in iconic moments, like this picture after Kobe's 3 in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. The sale of the jersey came 3 years after the icon's tragic death and remains the most expensive piece of Kobe memorabilia ever sold, overtaking a game-worn and signed jersey from Kobe's 1996 NBA season. Moving on to our next piece, we have Muhammad Ali's Rumble in the Jungle belt, fetching $6.2 million from Colts owner Jim Irsay in 2022. Let me paint you a picture. The year is 1974. Muhammad Ali was stripped of his title 7 years prior and banned for 3.5 years for failure to comply with the draft. He returned to boxing after the ban with wins against Jerry Quarry and Oscar Bonavena, setting up a title bout against Joe Frazier. Ali would lose to Frazier by unanimous decision, the first professional loss in his career. Ali would win his next 6 fights across 1972, but again suffer another defeat, this time at the hands of Ken Norton. At this point, Muhammad Ali was considering retirement, but would end up fighting Norton again, scoring a victory this time and setting up a rematch against Joe Frazier, who had just lost his belt to a young George Foreman. Ali would defeat Frazier by unanimous decision this time, setting up his participation in the historic Rumble in the Jungle. On the flip side of things, George Foreman, an Olympic gold medalist, was breaking out as a boxing superstar after beating the only 2 men Ali beat in just 2 rounds apiece. Now heavyweight champion of the world, Foreman would be fighting Muhammad Ali in what was once Zaire, Africa. Due to his dominance and being 7 years younger than Ali, Foreman was a heavy favorite, known for his explosive power. However, during the fight, experience would be the advantage that would tip the scales in Muhammad Ali's favor, employing his rope-a-dope tactic for the first time ever. The tactic was simple. Ali would lean against the ropes and take some punishment, but also allowing the ropes to absorb a lot of the energy, basically acting like a dope on the ropes to tire out the extremely powerful Foreman. The technique worked, and after surviving the first several rounds, Ali was able to turn the tables and knock Foreman out in the 8th round in what many would call the sporting event of this century. Sources say the fight was watched by an estimated 1 billion people and brought in 100 million at the time, which equates to 600 million, adjusted for inflation. It is perhaps the greatest boxing match of all time, so it's no wonder why the belt from that match would be so sought after. Following that up, we have this Babe Ruth rookie card from 1914. The first sporting card entry on this list, but certainly not the last. Babe Ruth is likely the most popular name associated with the game of baseball. You probably recognize the Babe for his time with the New York Yankees, but he actually began his professional career in his hometown of Baltimore, playing for the Baltimore Orioles for half a year in 1914. At this time, the Orioles were essentially a minor league team playing in the International League. Because this was so long ago, and Babe played for a smaller club, only 10 are known to exist to this day, all in varying conditions. This card itself was rated a 3 by SGC. Quick side note, in this video I will be discussing the grades of sporting cards, as these numbers have a dramatic impact on the overall value of the cards themselves. In short, cards are rated from A for authentic, which denotes extremely poor condition of the card, to a perfect gem mint 10. In order to find the grades of cards, you can have them sent to authenticators like PSA or SGC to have them done professionally. These companies specifically look at the centering, corners, edges, and surface to grade the cards. Alright, Back to the Babe Ruth rookie card. A 3 is a rather good grade for a card over 100 years old. KSA, another card grading company, describes a 3 as being very good, saying, "The corners are round, surface wear of up to half the card, which may include scuffing and scratches, may have more than one crease on the front and back of the card, major loss of gloss and stains, edge wear and discoloration are more noticeable." To keep such a rare card in good condition is a feat upon itself, and the family who kept and owned the card for over a century were paid handsomely for it. Up next, we have perhaps the most well-known sporting card in history, the Honus Wagner T206, also selling for $7.25 million. The card dates back to sometime between 1909 and 1911, released by the American Tobacco Company. The reason for this card's rarity and significant value is due to the fact that Honus Wagner, arguably the greatest player of that time, did not consent to have his image used by the ATC. There are theories as to why Honus Wagner did not give permission to have his name and likeness used on the cards. The first of which being that Wagner did not want his young, impressionable fans to purchase tobacco products in order to receive his card. And the other theory states that Wagner did not believe he was being fairly compensated for his name and likeness. Whichever you want to believe, this caused production of the card to stop, but not before 50 to 200 prints were already produced. This caused Honus Wagner T206s, especially those in good condition, to be extremely rare, going on to be some of the most bought and sold cards in history. The specific card that we are looking at was graded a PSA 2 and overtook a PSA 3 that was sold for $6.6 million in 2021. There exists a PSA 8 version of the card, currently in the possession of Arizona Diamondbacks owner Ken Kendrick. However, this card is shrouded in mystery. The card belonged to this man, Bill Maestro, who bought the card in 1985 for $25,000. It would pass through many famous hands, like Wayne Gretzky and Bruce McNall, before falling into Ken Kendrick's possession. But this card was almost too perfect. The gloss was too pristine. Sports writer Keith Olbermann would write in his blog, "The card looked brand new. It bore no earmarks of being a clever counterfeit, but it also bore no signs of nearly 92 years of aging. Unless somebody was standing at the printing press when the card was finished drying and stuffed it between the pages of a book and kept the book in a climate-controlled room from the opening days of the presidential administration of William Howard Taft and had only taken it out after the inauguration of George H.W. Bush, something seemed wrong." It would also come out in 2013, after Bill Maestro was indicted for mail fraud, that he also altered the Wagner T206 by trimming the card to make it appear cleaner in order to raise its value. So while the card wasn't necessarily fake, it had still been doctored. But enough about the fabled Gretzky T206 Honus Wagner. The Kendricks say they won't sell, leaving the most expensive Wagner T206 being the PSA 2. Up next, we have Lionel Messi's set of 6 2022 World Cup match-worn shirts, fetching $7.8 million. It is inarguably the most popular sport on the planet, being played in just about every country on Earth. On top of that, the World Cup is the most popular sporting event that exists, with the final being viewed by an estimated 5 billion people every 4 years. And Lionel Messi is about as close as you can get to being the GOAT of the sport. Whether you look at his 91-goal season, his 8 Ballon d'Ors, which designate the best player in the world each season, or perhaps his most recent massive accomplishment, leading his country, Argentina, to their first World Cup trophy since 1986. Messi played in his first World Cup in 2006 in Germany, and has played in every World Cup since. South Africa, Rio, Russia, and finally, Qatar, making him only one of 6 players to ever play in 5 different World Cups. But it was heartbreak after heartbreak for Messi in Argentina. Quarterfinal exits in Germany and South Africa, a heartbreaking defeat to Germany with Mario Götze's late winner in Rio, and a round of 16 exit in Russia. It almost looked like Messi wouldn't even make it to Russia when he announced after his 2016 loss to Chile in the Copa America final that he would retire. The news sent shockwaves across the globe. Thankfully, we know this decision wouldn't last, and that brings us to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. "This will be Lionel Messi's final World Cup," he announced. "It's all or nothing." Argentina glides past a relatively easy group, no surprises there, into the knockout rounds, where every game is win or go home. The Argentines face off against Australia, who are just happy to have made it this far. Argentina dispatches them 2-1. Argentina then gets a tough draw against a decent Netherlands side, and barely avoids defeat in a penalty shootout. They catch a break in their next match, avoiding the powerhouse of Brazil and getting past the arguably weaker Croatians. Here they are, the World Cup final. Messi has been here before and knows what it's like to lose. Now he wants to understand how it feels to win and bring glory to his country. This game will be their hardest yet, faced up against reigning World Cup champions and best team in the world, France, with golden boy Kylian Mbappe. The game starts out fantastic for the Argentinians, pulling ahead by 2 with goals from Messi and longtime teammate Angel Di Maria. The second half, however, spells trouble. Mbappe isn't going away quietly, and scores back-to-back goals late in the game to send it to extra time. In extra time, Messi strikes first, but Mbappe isn't to be outdone and scores just before time to earn his hat-trick on the night. It looks like we're going to penalties, until Kolo Muani of France gets loose. Somehow, Emi Martinez makes that save and sends the game to penalties. It's fitting that Mbappe and Messi start off the penalties, both scoring. The Argentinians don't miss a single penalty and go on to be crowned World Cup champions. Messi has at last won that elusive final trophy in his career and can now rest peacefully. It is truly the perfect ending to perhaps the greatest player's international career, and it's really no wonder why his jerseys from all but one group stage game at this tournament would go on to be worth more than $1 million apiece. Up next, we have the Dynasty collection, selling for just over $8 million. Air Jordan, 6 NBA championships, 6 Finals MVPs, 5 League MVPs, 10 scoring titles, and 2 Olympic gold medals. There's a reason his name is on the MVP trophy. Michael Jordan in the 90s was bigger than the game of basketball. He was an international icon, and his partnership with Nike on the Jordan brand propelled him to becoming the face of the NBA. Drafted by the Chicago Bulls with the 3rd pick in 1984, Jordan would immediately start putting up MVP caliber numbers by averaging 28, 6, and 6, and leading the Bulls to the playoffs. He would unfortunately get hurt the next season, but explode back by averaging a staggering 37 points the season after that. Michael would play out of his mind every season, but wouldn't make it to his first NBA Finals until the 1990-1991 season. It would take 4 tries, but eventually the Bulls would get by Isaiah Thomas's bad boy Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals to play Magic Johnson's Lakers in the NBA Finals. It proved to be easier than expected, with Jordan and the Bulls winning their first title 4-1 in the series. The Bulls would go on to triple this triumph, winning the next 2 NBA championships and completing their first three-peat. However, after this season, topped with coming off of the Dream Team run, gambling rumors, and the murder of his father, it proved to be too much for Mike, and he took a step away from the game. The news of his retirement, similar to Lionel Messi, sent shockwaves across the globe. Jordan would once again shock the sporting world by taking up baseball to honor his late father. He would play in the Chicago White Sox minor league system for the Birmingham Barons. Mike would have an unremarkable baseball season, and his presence was direly missed within the Bulls' rotation. The team just didn't have the juice without him, and would have a 31-31 record in 1995, when Michael Jordan would set the world ablaze with 2 simple words: "I'm back." He would lead the Bulls back to the playoffs, but they wouldn't have enough to get past the Orlando Magic. However, the Bulls would bounce back the next year and start off the season with a historical 41-3 record, finishing the year 72-10, a record at the time. They would only lose 3 games across 4 series and cakewalk to their 4th championship. The following season, the Bulls would finish 69-13 and advance all the way to the finals to play John Stockton and Karl Malone's Utah Jazz. In Game 1, Michael Jordan would strike first with a deep 2 to win the game. The Utah Jazz would fight back, winning 2 out of the next 3 and tying the series up at 2 games apiece. Game 5 would prove to be one of the most well-known not only in Michael Jordan's career, but NBA history as a whole. The fabled flu game. Jordan awoke late in the night before his game, nauseous, shaking, and sweating profusely. The medical team diagnosed him with either a stomach virus or food poisoning. Either way, they said there was no way he could play the next day. But that is not the cloth from which Jordan is cut. He stayed in bed until a little over an hour before the game, missed warm-ups, and looked to be a step slower than normal. None of it mattered. Jordan finished the game with 38 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and a block, hitting the go-ahead 3 with 25 seconds left and leading his team to a pivotal win in the series. The Chicago Bulls would win the next game at home, winning their 2nd championship in a row and their 5th championship all time. Michael Jordan and the Bulls would go on to win one more championship together, but more on that later in the video. Jordan is not only known worldwide due to his basketball prowess, his shoes almost rival his greatness. The Jordan brand generates an outrageous 13% of Nike's total revenue, with $6.59 billion per year. It is one of the most well-known shoe brands in the world, and of course, Jordan wore his own shoes. This collection has the 6 pairs that Michael Jordan won each of his 6 championships and finals MVPs in. Starting with the Air Jordan 6s in 91, the Air Jordan 7s in 92, the Air Jordan 8s in 93, the Air Jordan 11s in 96, the Air Jordan 12s in 97, and lastly, the Air Jordan 14s in 98. It's truly a spectacular collection of shoes that represent a very important fabric of NBA history. Just ahead of the Dynasty collection, we have the Olympic Games Manifesto, selling for $8.8 million. The first Olympic Games debuted around 776 BC and took place every 4 years until at least 393 AD, according to the International Olympic Committee. The Games were a religious festival, lasting 5 days and included running, throwing, jumping, boxing, wrestling, pancration, and chariot racing. These were the ancient games, and Greeks from all over would clamor to the sanctuary at Olympia to watch, with the stadium reaching its 40,000 capacity every single day of the games. These games, however, were lost to time as the tradition died out until 1892 when Frenchman Pierre de Coubertin wrote a 14-page manifesto outlining his idea for a modern games. He envisioned a world that would come together in athletic pursuits, a way to help countries overcome differences in culture and bring people of the world closer together. In 1894, he founded the International Olympic Committee, and 2 years after that, the first modern Olympic Games took place in Athens. The first Winter Olympics would take place in 1924, and the world has gotten to enjoy these 2 spectacles every 2 years since. This is all due to the foundation which Coubertin put forward back in 1892, and why his manifesto is such an important piece not only in Olympic history, but sporting history as a whole. Up next, we have Diego Maradona's Hand of God jersey, selling for $9.3 million. Before Lionel Messi, there was Diego Maradona. On par with legendary Brazilian striker Pelé, the two shared the honor of receiving the FIFA Player of the 20th Century award. Maradona, similar to Messi, was an undersized Argentinian who would go on to lead his country to glory. He would have quite the tumultuous career, reaching the highs of World Cup victory, but the lows of scandals, including a long history of substance abuse. However, Maradona finds his way onto this list because of a single game, perhaps the greatest individual performance seen in World Cup history. The year is 1986. Diego is entering his second World Cup with his countrymen, following a disappointing campaign in 1982. Argentina lifted the World Cup in 1978, but being 17 at the time, Maradona was left off the squad. Seeing his country take home the title without him must have been hard for the teenager, but now he was 25 and the team was his to lead. Argentina would start the tournament well, gliding past their relatively easy group. They would then scrape past rivals Uruguay, 1-0 in the knockout round to get drawn against England in the quarterfinals. Strangely enough, despite being thousands of miles away, this is one of the fiercest rivalries on the international stage. This rivalry began 20 years prior at the 1966 World Cup in England, where the host country would win 1-0. Argentina would dispute this loss, claiming the striker who scored was offside and that Argentinian captain Antonio Ratin was unjustly sent off. Whatever the case may be, the Argentinians were sent home full of resentment and animosity towards England. Now the pair would meet again, and Argentina, with perhaps the greatest player in the world, were out for revenge. The first half would prove to be uneventful, finishing 0-0. The second half, on the other hand, would include 2 goals that are still talked about today, almost 40 years later, with both being scored by Maradona. The first goal would happen when an English defender mishit the ball, causing it to loop between their goalie and Maradona, where Diego, who was 8 inches shorter than the goalie at 5'5", miraculously outjumped him to score. At least, that's how it appeared on first glance. However, it's clear from the other angles that Maradona used his hand to get to the ball first. And since video replay or VAR wasn't available back then, the referee missed the call and it stood, much to the English player's outrage. After the game, Maradona would say he scored the goal a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. The next goal would happen only 4 minutes later and would be dubbed the goal of the century. Maradona completed a 60-yard solo run through 4 English defenders and feinted the goalie before tapping the ball into the now open net. 2 of the most iconic goals of the sport, scored within 5 minutes of each other on the biggest stage in the world by one of the greatest players of all time. I'd say $9.3 million is a fair price for that piece of history. In our third to last spot, we have Michael Jordan's 1998 Game 1 NBA Finals Chicago Bulls jersey, breaking the $10 million barrier, selling for $10,091,000. We've already covered Jordan's first 5 championships, but his 6th and final is arguably his greatest. This season was documented extensively in The Last Dance, so I'll just provide a summary. The Bulls would finish the 97-98 season with a record of 62-20. Jordan would pick up his 5th and final league MVP along the way. The Bulls would breeze to the Eastern Conference Finals, but struggle against the Pacers, going all the way to Game 7, which the Bulls would eventually win. They were back to the finals. A second three-peat in the same decade was on the line, and they're matched up with a familiar opponent, Stockton and Malone's Jazz. These teams were evenly matched, finishing with the exact same regular season record, but Utah would strike first with an overtime win at home in Game 1. The Bulls would bounce back, winning the next 3 games, now just a single game away from glory. The Bulls would slip, losing Game 5 83-81 and setting up the most viewed game in NBA history. The game would start poorly for the Bulls, with Pippen aggravating a pre-existing back injury very early in the game. Jordan's already extreme workload just got a lot heavier. This didn't seem to faze Jordan, who would drop 23 points in the first half. Late in the game, it's all tied up at 83 with a minute to go. Jordan had just drilled 2 clutch free throws to tie it, but John Stockton would hit a massive go-ahead 3-pointer with 42 seconds remaining. It's looking like we may be heading to Game 7, but Jordan cuts the deficit to 1 with a layup. Mike then gets the biggest steal of his career, taking the ball from Karl Malone. Jordan takes the ball up, and the rest is history. With perhaps the most iconic shot in NBA history, Michael Jordan is a 6-time champion and arguably the greatest to ever step on the hardwood. The particular jersey that was sold was from Game 1 of the series and is easily the most expensive basketball jersey ever sold, surpassing Kobe's rookie jersey at the time of sale in 2022. In our runner-up spot, we have the most expensive sports card in the world, the highly coveted 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card. Back in the day, baseball cards weren't traded as collectibles that held any real value, so when the year was up, they would stop selling the old cards to make room for the cards of the new year. The specific set that this card was in would not sell. There were boxes and boxes of 1952 Topps sitting there worthless, so Topps decided to be done with them. So they hauled them off and dumped them into the Atlantic Ocean. It's somewhat ironic that this action would turn the remaining worthless boxes into the holy grails of the sports card world. To put into perspective how rare and valuable these cards are, a brick of 8 packs from the set sold for $873,300. This means each pack is roughly worth $109,000. Back in 1952, these packs were 50 cents a pop. So if you bought some and held on to them, you would have seen 208,000x return on your investment. Not a bad chunk of change. Mickey Mantle's card in particular is worth so much because not only is it a rookie card, but it is also the card of one of the most beloved members of the game. Mantle was a legend, winning 7 World Series and 3 American League MVPs. It also helped that he played for the most recognizable team in the history of the game, the New York Yankees. What makes this card so crazy is that it isn't even the rarest card on this list. In fact, most estimates believe there to be between 1,800 and 3,000 cards in existence. However, the extremely high grades these cards can have give it an edge over the other cards on this list. The Mickey Mantle card on this list was graded a 9.5 by SGC, an extremely respectable score and worthy of its astronomical price. But there are 3 PSA 10s known in existence, and their value blows the 9.5 out of the water. It is estimated that a PSA 10 could be worth over $50 million. 2 belong to Ken Kendrick, who owns that Honus Wagner T206 PSA 8, and the other belongs to legendary collector Marshall Fogel. Only time will tell if they ever sell, but if they do, it is clear that the record will be shattered. These cards are baseball heritage, and if you take anything away from this video, remember to always take care of your cards, because one day it could be the difference between $20,000 and $50 million. And finally, in our number 1 spot, the most expensive piece of sports memorabilia is the 1932 Babe Ruth called shot jersey, selling for a staggering $24.1 million, almost double the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card. We've all done it. You're playing backyard baseball with your buddies growing up when someone steps up to the plate and points their bat to the fence. Now, 99 times out of 100, this doesn't work and you end up making a fool of yourself. But that one time it ever does feels like magic. And for Babe Ruth, the most historic name in baseball, when he calls his shot, he means it. Babe and the Yankees were playing Game 3 of the World Series at legendary Wrigley Field in 1932, when in the 5th inning, he made the iconic gesture and hit a bomb. The Yankees would win that game and the next, completing their sweep of the Cubs and giving Babe Ruth his final World Series. It would be the last home run he ever hit in a World Series. Almost 100 years later, and this is still the most imitated move in the game, known by those playing from Little League to the big leagues. A lot of our grandparents aren't even old enough to have gone to this game to see this play, yet it is known by all. Babe Ruth's impact on the game cannot be overstated, and I think it's fitting his jersey sits atop this list by a considerable margin. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.